Hi, this is Rich Harrington, and welcome to the Mind Your Own Business Show. We're going to be talking about practical advice for photographers, giving you some things that you can do to improve your photography business. Now, we've got a great guest this week, and to introduce him, I'm going to toss over to my co-host, Skip Cohen. Skip, go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, I want everybody to be impressed with the incredible quality of light that I have here with a little bit of split lighting, known as a 1995 Target gooseneck bulb, which does seem to be doing very well. So that'll be here. I'll keep turning this way now and then. Yeah, Don and I met actually a couple of years ago on a program that he was doing. He was on the monitor, and I was in a Google Hangout in the Panasonic booth. And what I've really enjoyed, he's a photographer, he's a writer, he clearly has a great book called Sky Crystals. But what I love is the story behind Sky Crystals. He's also a social media maven and did something that I have rarely heard of. In fact, I haven't heard at all, where he built up his database in social media before launching his book, and then utilized that database and the incredible trust he had built up with all of his followers to tie back in to the book. And he's also one of the most endearing total nerds that I have ever met. This is the ultimate in tech weenie-ship, because there are so many sections in Sky Crystals that really do take you through the microscopy behind it. And there's a $10 word, but it took me back to my early Polaroid days working with a lot of engineers in the microscopy labs, and just the techniques, and then to get that beauty out of it, because he's also an artist. So on that note, here's Don Komarechka live from Canada.
Oh, you've made such a huge build-up here, Skip. I don't know if I can live up to these expectations you've set in front of me.
Well, they're pretty big.
So, I know we want to talk about the Sky Crystals and that whole project, and I think, Skip, you mentioned a really interesting thing that I built up my social media while I was kind of dipping my toes in the water in a sort of a personal project, something that was passionate for me to just explore photographically. And something that I didn't see anybody else doing in quite the same way. And I think that's really at the heart of projects like this. In order to have any amount of success, of course, the passion comes from it, but you can't expect to follow the path through a commercialization of a product or a service if you want it to start purely with passion. And I think that if you do have sort of a passionate, sort of not seeking any money kind of approach to a project, then from there it will evolve into something that is much more than what you initially intended to.
Excellent. Well, to that end, let's give people a little bit about the backstory. So you decided that you wanted to put together and focus on your photography. What came first? Did you know going in that you were going to put a book out and you started to build an audience, or did you decide, you know what, I just want to get my work out there, and you were surprised by the demand and you decided to put it out? What was the order of operations if you look back?
It was the latter. I mean, at the time, I was my formal education is in advertising, and I'd encourage any photographers to get even a glimpse of education in advertising and marketing. It'll help you a lot. But I was working at a boring desk job at an ad agency. I can remember distinctly that day I was tasked with creating a corporate organizational chart, and it was the driest, most boring thing that I could possibly imagine. And they underestimated the skills that I had, so I got it done in like 20 minutes. But then, I'm just farting around with my camera at work, and you'd be surprised how interesting like paper clips and push pins and ballpoint pens and all those things look like under an extreme macro lens. It's quite fascinating. So needless to say, I took a very long lunch break that day, and I looked outside and it was snowing. And I thought to myself, well, that would probably look fantastic in front of this camera. And that was sort of the inception of this, I almost want to call it an obsession with the subject, because it's kind of evolved into something like that. But I just kept shooting it. I went home that day, it was still snowing, and I kept shooting, and I started sharing these initial images. And I got a huge response. And so I knew that I needed to create more of this material. But at this point, I was just trying to feed the beast. I was trying to create material that would, be enjoyed by the people following me on social media. and sharing it often, and that was the key too. In order to keep people talking about it and to send people back to my social media stream and to see even more of it, and then they start following me, and then this whole thing snowballs, pardon the pun, into something much, much bigger. So that first year, I might have made 20 or 30 images that were a huge success. And I took that and I said, okay, well, I can pitch this. I can throw it against the wall and see where it sticks. And I had originally approached, I think it was Outdoor Photography Canada, which I write for on a regular basis now. And I approached a number of other magazines too, by the way. But they got back to me and they said, all right, if you want to write an article on snowflake photography on spec, we'll take a look at it. And so I put on my writing hat, and I did. And that ended up being my first cover shot. Had a great feature story in there. And that told me, okay, there is more substance to this than I'm giving it credit for right now. I need to do something very interesting with this project. So going into the next winter, I said, all right, I'm going to do what I called my Snowflake a Day project. I was going to torture myself to produce one of these things every single day for 100 days for the entirety of winter up here. And so that's from December 1st.
It's a good thing you don't live in Arizona.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, if I were to do like a summer project in Arizona, I'd never be done. So for those that don't know, each of the images that I produce are made from anywhere between, say, 20 and 70 separate images using focus stacking techniques and a lot of post-processing. And so in each post that I made, I would talk a bit about the physics. I talk a bit about the post-processing. I would give more substance than just a photograph. And that became as popular as the images themselves, because I would be able to express my personality through that, and my passion for the subject really shone through. And so 4 to 5 hours of editing per image was required every single day, nonstop for 100 days, plus the social media interaction and everything else. So it was a full-time job to sit down and say, okay, I want to make this into something really special. And I'm not going to get paid for it, but let's just see where it goes. And 2 years of doing those winters, I amassed enough material to say, yeah, you know what, I have enough images here, multiple hundreds of snowflakes, and all of the knowledge that I think would be required to put this together into a book. People are asking me for my snowflake photographs weeks and months before I start the project again. I know there's a lot of very eager eyes on exactly what I'm doing. And if these people are as passionate about it as I am, then they might be willing to buy a product from me. And so at that point, I said, all right, let's kick off it was Indiegogo that I had used to crowdfund the whole project, and let's turn this into something tangible that I can put in front of everybody and thank them for their passion and their encouragement to build me along this whole project.
Now, before we explore that, and Skip, I know you have some questions as well. I get people all the time who will send me pitches to fund their personal projects. You know, being a publisher of a website, somehow people think that means that we have huge funds, but they just want exposure. Oh, hey, fund me. I'm looking to do this personal project. And I've rarely felt compelled. There's been a few people that I've known who've shared some personal projects that have really resonated. But it sounds like you spent 2 years before you asked anybody to get involved just giving. And then when it came around time to asking, you had probably more people willing than you even expected.
Exactly. So if somebody were to do a photo series, I don't know, just make something up that, say, pictures of people holding exploding fruit, whatever it happens to be, just something random that gathers attention, and then, okay, so maybe they got featured on Petapixel, maybe they build up a huge following on Instagram, or maybe they get, if they can build up an audience that is continuously coming back for more of that, then you have something to offer them. If you don't have this audience in hand, ready and waiting, then you're going to have a very difficult time pitching them anything, because they don't care about you. They don't care about the project. And if their first impression of you and the project is you asking them for money, you're not going to win. You will fail. So you have to approach this from a completely honest, passionate standpoint, really building up this attention when you have no product in mind, when you have no intention to go digging in people's wallets.
Yeah, Rich, I mean, back in my Hasselblad days, as president of Hasselblad, I would get anywhere from, I don't know, 6 to 10 requests a week for funding. even going back earlier to my Polaroid days. I mean, I remember Jim Garner, the actor, submitting a proposal to Polaroid for $1 million to sponsor one of his race cars, where we were going to put the Polaroid logo on the back of the car, and the logo was going to be approximately 24 inches long, and it was going to go on cars that were going to drive by crowds at 180 miles an hour. And you're sitting there trying to justify that. And I remember actually calling myself at one point. I was the manager of Nebulous Promotions, because stuff would come in all the time. And what I love about the way Don did this, Don, how many followers did you have when you announced that you were going to put this into a book and needed help?
So this is an interesting thing. So I want to talk about followers and what these numbers actually mean, because the number of followers that I have is not directly in proportion to the amount of engagement that one might expect.
Correct. But it was still a big number.
Yeah. So I had like when I first started and got these ideas, I had around maybe 20 to 30,000 followers on Google Plus, and maybe about equal numbers in various other social media networks combined. And I was really pushing the Google Plus market at that time. I know some people have left the network, but it still is very responsive for me to this day. And I was showing this project on podcasts and in other things, just being passionate about the subject. And it turned out that one of the participants on one of these podcasts worked at Google and added me to the Google suggested users list because of the passion I had for this project that I was constantly posting. And that took my social media numbers from, say, 20 to 30,000 to well over 1 million in the span of like 2 or 3 months. And that generated a ton of interest in the project, a ton of extra plus ones and shares that then, as soon as you get to a certain breaking point, then you get featured by Google again, and that introduces an entirely new market. But all of these opportunities, everybody's going to face different ones. They're 100% fueled by passion and luck, but the harder you work, the luckier you are with a lot of this stuff. So yeah, the numbers when I when I was concluding the crowdfunding campaign were well over 1 million.
Okay, and I know you sometimes have, and we've had this conversation. You've played down the fact that you look at 1 million number and everybody goes, "Wow." The reality is that out of that million, what's the line? 5% of the fishermen catch 98% of the fish. Out of that million, is it safe to say it was probably 5 to 10% that became your real core group of supporters? Does that sound about right?
I'd say that's pretty much about accurate.
Okay.
And the same is true in almost every social media network, with a few exceptions, where if you're starting out small, then your number is more closer to 100%. And as that number increases, the higher that gets, the less important it is, by looking at it as a whole number.
All right, but this is the piece that I love about what you did, is that you build up this core group, and then you hit them with, you'd already built up a certain amount of trust and loyalty. And this is where I love the way you talk about passion and passion for a project. But that million was, to me, a critical component in helping build brand awareness. So that even though the other 90% or so weren't necessarily directly engaged, it was building up your reputation as an artist, as a photographer, as a, I hate to use the word technician, but it is such a great word, because you are teaching technique. I mean, one of the things I love about your book is that it's a beautiful coffee table book, and it can just as easily double as a textbook, because there is so much good information. So you took that by listening to your audience, by taking things that you felt needed to be able to present the project and the title. Sorry, Rich, I got carried away there.
Oh, no, thank you, Skip. But the content was in some way predetermined by the audience, because I was posting all of the content with each image. Everything that I had written about in the book, I had written before in various different forms across hundreds of different posts. And the feedback that I got from that really said, okay, I want to take the content of the book and push it in this direction. People are interested in this content. They're interested in that content. And I guess the funny part was I gave them everything for free. I mean, all the content in the book was, presented across hundreds of posts, and a lot of people can go back and read them. So I gave them everything for free and then asked them to pay for it in one nice tomb of knowledge, and they agreed to it. But it was the content that they themselves said that they wanted. The book was not like an ego piece. It doesn't really talk about me or anything. Like, most of the content is scientific. It's the workflow process. There is some, in certain areas, there's some self-deprecating humor. But, I mean, it's to the point of it, it's a book that people can read and get something for themselves out of. It's not that they finish reading that book and they think, oh, well, this Don Komarechka guy, he really thinks highly of himself. If you write a book like that, even if you have a good amount of followers, they won't enjoy the product. You know, you have to write this for them, not for you.
Well, so before we dig a little bit deeper into that, I do want to encourage those folks who are listening, if you would like to ask a question, you can post it in the Q&A pod. Just click the Q&A button on the player, and you could post questions. We'll be taking some of those questions on the show, and we'll also be drawing from those questions at the end to give away a one-year plan of the Adobe Creative Cloud plan, Photographer's Plan. Thanks to Adobe for that, and that'll be a very useful tool to get you started. So just remember, post a question in there. Now, Don, you talked about the success of the book, and one thing that I'd like to translate this to all readers is the importance of publishing. First, you started publishing your own work through social platforms, eventually your website. You've started selling prints and selling a book. For most people, even successful authors, considered by successful terms in the photography field, it's not like a book is the last thing you ever have to do to fund the rest of your life. It's really a milestone moment. There's very few people who can live off of book revenue. I think I know one. And the people that succeed, it's great, but why did you decide to do a book, and how has this act of publishing opened up new doors for you? You know, in other words, like if someone's watching the show or watching the replay and they're thinking, well, I don't know, you know, it's a lot of effort and a lot of time. What did you get out of this act of publishing? What sort of doors did it open?
Oh, well, it opened a ton of doors. So some of the biggest ones would be I got a book order, and I noticed that it was being shipped to, because I do all the fulfillment myself, by the way. As a self-publisher, the beautiful thing is the revenue is 100% mine, especially when I'm using my own website to do the sales. Funny enough, if I were to be shipping the book to Amazon in the US, the shipping cost plus their amount that they take plus the amount that they can discount the book, I'd be losing about $5 a copy. Because the book is heavy. It's a big book. And Amazon would ship this and market this as like a tiny little paperback. And so, okay, it wasn't feasible for me to go that route. So, I mean, the revenue, it is still a stream for me coming through. But I got a book order from CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And so I followed up, and I just emailed the guy saying, hey, I'm glad CBC is interested in my book. I see it's going there. If you need anything from me, you know, please let me know. He ended up being one of the producers for a program called The Nature of Things, which is a documentary TV series in Canada. And they were doing initial research for an episode of the show called Chasing Snowflakes. Long story short, they featured me. I began the episode and I finished the episode. So they did 2 filming bits with me in the field photographing snowflakes and waterfall landscapes in winter weather. And that came because somebody at CBC bought a physical copy of this book. Had they gotten a physical copy, that may not have happened. The work that I put in, the passion that I put into this got me a recommendation to do some work on a similar topic for BBC Science. And I can't talk about that because that hasn't aired yet. But the fact is I've done some work for them in relation to this work that I've done in the past. And yeah, you know, those are some of the big doors. I'm sure there are a ton of smaller doors that have opened because of it. And you never know. Like you can maybe plan for certain things here and there, but I don't know what's going to happen when I release one of these projects. I just know that I've got to put everything I can into it and make sure that the reward is worth the risk. But there will be doors that open when you do this kind of thing. And to have a physical product versus an ebook, I mean, part of it is a credibility thing. I mean, everybody and anybody can produce an ebook, and in fact, I've got a couple of great ebook ideas in the wings myself. It's not to say that I'm not going to do that, but the subject matter and the amount of written content, it was going to be. I was planning on 300 pages, and I'm thinking, hey, how many ebooks books do I ever see that are 300 pages in size? This is really screaming to have a a physical representation. And because most of the images were square, I wanted the book to be square. If it's in an ebook format, if I want to have a full page image, well, then I'm going to have to compromise on exactly how I display the photograph. There's not many square ebook readers out there. So, all of these different things together decided, well, I'm going to have to contact a printer, and I'm going to have to get quotes on some pretty high volumes of custom print runs.
Pretty cool. So that's obviously a new process to explore. Now, as you've started building this out, and once the project ran its life, obviously it's still going. But how do you keep people engaged and interested in the project? What are some strategies that a photographer who's undertaken a personal project can keep feeding that project and can keep interest in that project so it has a longer lifespan?
Well, keep evolving the project for one. I mean, if you've picked something that is that's a true passion of yours, and you can think outside the box with it, and you're already doing that in order to build up an audience, or at least you should be, then you have many untapped ideas just waiting in the wings. Once you start to explore these initial roads, all the branches that kind of come off of that are how you continue to feed back into it. So I've done another couple of years of that Snowflake a Day project, and so that keeps feeding the fire and keeping the interest in the book. But this year, to take this project farther and in different directions. For those that haven't seen the images, I mean, I've got some unbound pages of the book, but when I'm looking at something like this, you've got like untold depth and detail. And if I'm looking at a snowflake that has surface detail on the front and on the back, and I can even tell if there's bubbles inside and where the shadows are cast, I can tell where there's different layers. I have enough information to make a 3D model of that snowflake. And if I can make a 3D model of it, I can make a 3D print of it. And if I can make a 3D print, then I can make jewelry, I can make Christmas tree ornaments, I can make all of these other things that tie into sort of a second round of generating interest from people that have bought the book. Well, then I already have a loyal audience that love the content that I'm creating, and I need to continue to feed that audience with more passion and experimentation and the same stuff that made them so interested in my work to begin with. I just have to explore that in new ways. That's going to be different for every single project, but you can't stop when the books are printed and shipped. That's just the starting point.
Well, you just hit on something that in my very early Polaroid days, when Polaroid came out with the Spectra camera, it was the first instant camera that was a full system. And it had accessories, and it had a wireless remote, and it had self-timers, and it had Coke and filters that went along with it. And the whole issue at the time was something that Polaroid at the time was calling continuity marketing, which was just further enhancing Polaroid owners' experience by giving them more things that they could do with the product. And I love it. I mean, I love what you're doing with this. It also hits on something that Rich and I have talked on with a number of other guests about, and that's the importance of special projects. Because, and it's ironic, we keep using the word snowballing. Sorry, everybody, it's a bad pun to use, but the reality is this project of yours, it started out purely as something passionate that you love doing and were fascinated by, has snowballed into other projects, other directions, other spin-offs, and things that you were just talking about now when you start talking about a 3D print and snowflake ornaments and all the things that you can do with it. When you've got that passion, and this is why, everybody, and to all our listeners, you really need to stay on those special projects because they help you stay focused on the creativity and that burn you've got inside you to do something with your images. Sorry, I keep getting on soapboxes today, Rich.
It's okay. So, well, this is good practical advice. So remember, folks, if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the Q&A pod. So, Don, as you started down this path and you started to attract a social media following, one of the things, well, I'll ask you two questions. Two things I think that most photographers struggle with on social media. One is the desire to have the approval of people they perceive to be their peers and how they handle that negative feedback as it starts to come in. And the second is you seem to have had incredible stamina of putting these posts out daily. Any practical advice you could share on doing that? So first off, how do you handle the first few times or the hardest times when you don't feel the love online and you really feel like your work's being attacked?
Well, it's funny because I've had a few people comment that, oh, those are great 3D renders. I'm thinking, huh, okay, I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult. If it looks so perfect that it's computer generated, well, maybe I'll take that as a compliment because I created that from nature. And so there's that kind of stuff. But to be honest, I didn't get a whole lot of overarching negative feedback, or at least the negative feedback that I got paled in comparison to the positive feedback. And for me, negative or positive, there's no worse comment than saying nice pick. I don't consider that positive feedback and positive commentary. But I dig into the substance, the actual reasoning behind any of these comments or critiques or anything that you would consider to be commentary on the work. And some of them were saying, wow, that's way too in-depth. And other people were saying, wow, I love how in-depth that is. Well, okay, I know I like to be in-depth, so if you don't like it, then just look at the pretty picture and move on. Then this is not your project for you to be following. So you have to kind of find the audience that thinks like you. And that's the audience that you are going to find your drive with. And the people that come across your work and they don't like it, well, they never were going to like it, and they were never going to be your audience. And it was sort of a shotgun approach where some sort of maybe a social media success or a blog gathered that attention from that person, and they just like being a troll on the internet. And so just take that for what it is. Let that roll off your back. As long as the positive comments outweigh the negative comments, you're going in the right direction. And so I guess that kind of sums it up, Rich. But what was the second part of that question?
The second part is maintaining stamina. So, as we pick projects and, life gets in the way. The only reason why there's content every day on Photo Focus is because we have a team of writers. Skip, I don't know how you do it. It's like if I had to every day think of something coherent to say, there'd be some pretty incoherent days. So, do you stockpile? Do you say, I'm feeling really creative, let's get 2 or 3 of these done and take a day off? Or any strategies you could share about blogging tips as well as the importance of blogging?
Well, I'll tell you that the project has nearly killed me for a number of years. I mean, it pushes me to the breaking point, and then some days I just don't even know if I can do it. I do try to stockpile, as many people would in that scenario, but the amount of time that it takes, I'm usually able to stockpile maybe 2 days over the winter time, and I use that for Christmas and New Year's. And those are days that I wouldn't be, in front of the computer typically anyhow. And but I remember it was day number 98 of this past year, and I got my snowflake up at like 4:30 in the morning because I had only started editing it at midnight because of all of this other stuff that I had to do, and I should have gone to bed. But the fact is that I committed myself to doing one every single day. If I didn't make that commitment, and if I wasn't so close to the end, there's no way I would have done it. If I just said I'm going to post a bunch of these, maybe one day, maybe not, then I'm going to post like 12 of them a year. But because I told myself every day I have to do this, then I'm going to create a body of work that is suitable for publication. And I can't tell you how frustrating it was some days when I'm just slogging through this, and I've taken the pictures, and when I'm doing the editing process, after I've done, say, 100 or 200, or at this point probably over 500 of them, it becomes somewhat monotonous. It becomes something like an assembly line where I am doing very intricate work, but the creativity kind of goes a little bit by the wayside. My attention can be a bit more diverse. So I can be doing this. It's like knitting, If you're, I don't know how to knit, but somebody that knows how to knit can do it without thinking about it. And you can watch TV at the same time. So I bring up Netflix, and I'll just binge watch TV shows while I'm doing editing and things like that. So it takes a little bit of the pain away from it.
Very good. Well, we had a question from Brian Casey, who's watching, and I think he missed the part where you mentioned this a little bit, but maybe you can go a little bit deeper. He was talking about the idea of making 3D printers and the 3D models specifically to start getting into totally different markets of, necklaces, jewelry, other items. I know some other photographers have seen good financial success of turning their things into commercial products as opposed to just books. How far have you thought of taking this, and what sort of opportunities do you think there are to translate your, not just your photography work, but photographers' work in general beyond just books and prints?
Well, again, it all depends on the audience and it depends on the context of the special project, right? So you look at anything that, say, look at the video game Angry Birds. Well, you can go into a store and buy Angry Birds toys and pillows and things like that. I mean, there's a market beyond the initial product in a lot of different ways if people want it. Now, do people want it? Well, people are selling snowflake ornaments and jewelry all over the place, but they're, fully symmetrical, like cutouts and things like that. And I figure if I can bring my own passion to it, anybody that's bought a copy of my book at the right price point will probably be interested in buying one of those because I've already established a market that's interested in that subject specifically from me. And so I think that there's enough of a market to pursue. Now, in making a 3D model, there's some software out there, and I still haven't decided exactly which one I want to use, that can use an image as a base, as a cutout, to create a 3D sort of template. And then using the original image as an overlay, I can increase or decrease indentations on one surface or on a rear surface and figure out exactly where these different layers should be. I'm going to assume it's going to take me between 10 and 20 hours to create a rough 3D model for which I would then prototype and then probably about double the amount of time to perfect. It's not going to be an easy project. There's probably around 50 to 60 hours of work creating the first one, and that includes learning some of the software techniques. 3D printing has come a long way. You can get a very good 3D printer. The one that I'm looking at is the Ultimaker 2. It prints down to a 20 micron scale, which I can get very, very fine detail in. And they'll print now on clear plastics like PET so that I can make a really cool transparent snowflake. And then maybe I'll light it in different ways. There's lots of fun ideas that I have in mind. Will that be a financial success? I have no idea. But the narrative of figuring all of this out is valuable for my audience regardless. And so, just in the other room, I have an 11 by 14 studio camera that I'm in the process of restoring and rebuilding. And I'm just building a lens board for it right now, and one of the ridiculous goals I have in mind is to get a couple of buddies and kind of disassemble some of the bolts of the cast iron wheels and stuff on the bottom and load that into a car or a truck, take that out to some beautiful lake scene and do some like sunset or sunrise or star trail photography with a camera from 1906. And whether or not it results in an interesting photograph, it results in a very cool narrative that a lot of people will want to read. The story is very valuable. How you proceed through these projects is almost as important as the initial successes that you have with the project. And funny thing that I mentioned that I didn't even intend to connect the two, but I had an idea where I wanted to make a print of snowflakes that are actual size. So snowflakes are small things, anywhere from, say, a half a millimeter to a centimeter or so in size. And inkjet printers these days, they can do 600 dpi, maybe 720, but they really can't give me the detail that would encourage somebody to take a magnifying glass up to a print. And so I got the idea that, well, what if I make a really big poster print that's in the ratio of 11 by 14 and take a picture of it with that ancient camera that I have and then do a contact print of that negative, and I can make an 11 by 14 that has a much higher resolution that people can look at with a magnifying glass. Will anybody buy it? Maybe not, but the fact is that I've got a really cool story and I've got a really cool product that will feed back into the initial product that I had created to begin with.
Okay, so following this logical path here, and let's broaden this out to take some of the lessons learned. As you get passionate on a project and you find something that you really believe in, how do other photographers make this something that they can do? Is there anything that you would say, what, here's 3 things I did early on that I would avoid, or here's 3 successes I had that I think anybody can learn from?
Well, I do want to make a note on the point of failure here with the book. The entire print run needed to be redone. The first print run needed to be scrapped and completely reprinted on different technology. And part of it was my fault, not knowing the print industry as well as the people printing the book should have. But the pages of the book contain a lot of black and a lot of dark ink because the background behind a lot of the images is dark. And the original print run was done on a sheet fed, on a web press. And so a web press has a gigantic roll of paper that runs under tension through the 4 primary colors, CMYK, that produces the prints. but the rapid addition of moisture and then the rapid drying process caused all of the pages to ripple. And you can kind of see that to some degree in the sample that I have here. If I get the light just right, you can see a bit of a ripple effect. Now that became magnified when all the pages were bound and stuck together. And so you had a very serious ripple. And when I sent out some of the very first books, I got complaints from people saying that they thought that their copy of the book had water damage, and they sent me pictures of the damage expecting another copy. And I'm like, okay, I can't sell this. This is not only now, does this transform from a moment of huge success to crisis management? How do I now approach this to say, okay, well, every one of my books are defective. How do I fix this? The printer said that that was normal.
Yes, but normal and what customers expect are not necessarily in agreement with each other.
Exactly. And so I went back to them and I said, well, you picked out so many little things in this book, like that I shouldn't have the UV spot gloss run around the spine because it might crack, and page 253 didn't have a bleed that went out far enough. It was 1/16 of an inch not far enough, and they made a whole list of these little things. But they didn't tell me that the pages will ripple on this press technology, which is a really big thing. And so I threatened open letters and all sorts of stuff to them, and finally they said, all right, well, we'll reprint it as long as you want to pay the difference to have a newer press technology done. And so we went for a thicker paper, and we used a sheet-fed press, which doesn't have paper under tension. It doesn't go through a rapid drying process. These sheets just go through a Heidelberg press and come out the other side, and then they just sit there until they're dry and they print on the other side of it. And I sat through the print production. I think it was 36 hours straight on press, and I was there signing off on every new sheet that came off of that press to make sure that it was perfect. Because if it wasn't, and if somebody else is publishing this book and the publisher is also the printer and they're saying, oh, it's fine, then my reputation is going to be damaged by it in some way. Whereas in this case, I can fight for my reputation, and I had to, tooth and nail. There was many sleepless nights where I was, just worrying about whether or not this project would indeed be a success. So if that's a point of failure that I made and the lessons learned, well, if you're printing a book, use a sheet-fed press. But also take your passion right to the bank. I mean, don't let anything, any compromise hold you back, especially if you are trying to make this as a signature piece that represents your work, the passion that you've put into it. And again, writing that fine line where you don't want it to be about you, but rather the work itself and to be written for your audience. So those are some of the takeaways. I would say, too, that I underestimated how much it costs to ship books internationally. So from some of the first international shippers or shipments that I had made, I was losing money because shipping to Australia costs like $50 to ship one of these books out. And so, well, slap on the wrist. There weren't too many orders from Australia, so I wasn't terribly worried about that. But do as much possible research that would normally be outside of your scope of knowledge. If you have to lend yourself to any other experts, like you might need to hire a copywriter, somebody that goes in and reads all of your words and maybe makes some serious grammatical changes because you might not be the strongest writer. Then you might need to hire somebody that goes in and reviews and finds all of the typos from that point forward. You might need to hire a layout designer. Don't try to do everything yourself. Although I did everything myself, because I had a background using all of the different bits of software, and I have had a background writing, and if you are a photographer that does not have a background writing, then hire somebody to make it that much better, because your work is going to stand on its own without you there speaking for it. And if you don't have a wide enough vocabulary, or you mix up the words your and your, or you accidentally put the apostrophe in its when it shouldn't be there. I mean, these are little things, but they all add up to something that can detract from your work quite heavily. And you might need somebody there to take a look over it and make it so much better, because that's their skills and that's their expertise. And a lot of different experts are needed to put one of these projects together.
Well, you hit on something in there that goes under the overall umbrella of customer service. The friendship between you and I, Don, started right around that time, about a year and a half ago, when you were going through the challenge of how do I deliver this book that's now defective that I have to reprint? And you were really focused on your December deadline and trying to get it out there in time. And I think what everybody needs to remember, and it ties back in with special projects, it ties back in with your business, it ties in with just doing a simple family portrait, is having a sense of service, of customer service. It's you build up an incredible amount of trust with your readers, your followers, with other artists, with people that were interested in your work. And I think one of the things that I loved, and you and I had a couple of marathon phone conversations in there on some of this stuff, and it was your sense of customer service. It was your sense of saying, damn it, I am not going to disappoint anybody and deliver what I promised. And that's at the core, and should be at the core of every single entrepreneur's business, no matter what it is, no matter what your specialty is, especially as a photographer.
So as you're looking at some of these changes that have been happening lately as you've been publishing and going through this process, how in the years of when you started to now has the social media landscape changed for you? Are you seeing any new opportunities for engagement? Are you finding any particular ways most useful? We've talked before not about just the importance of the total number of likes, but rather the real-world engagement. And so how are you getting that? Where are the best opportunities or the most engagement coming from these days for you?
Well, I still see a lot of engagement on Google+, even though a lot of people are kind of poo-pooing the social media network and they're kind of breaking it apart into different pieces. There's still a lot of people very active in photography communities there. But I do find that the strongest amount of sort of personal interaction I find on things happens to be with places like Facebook, because I have an entrenched audience that are primarily people that I might know in person. Like I do a lot of speaking at camera clubs, and then somebody that attended that presentation might add me on Facebook, and we've had a face-to-face dialogue at some point. And so that, I think, really adds value to any further conversations that happen online. So, I mean, the social media network is constantly in flux. So this past year, I posted my Snowflake a Day project to Google+, Facebook, Flickr, 500px, Instagram, and Twitter. Every single day, I was making posts to all of those networks. I think 5 of them. And sometimes, on 500px, just out of the blue, you'd get enough steam for one of your images to make it into the popular listing, and then you get like 100 times more views than you would normally get. And the same thing for Flickr. Sometimes somebody would put it onto their Explorer, I think is what they call it. And then you get, normally you might get 2,000 views, but you'll get 30,000 views on that particular image because it's sitting at the top and it's getting a lot more eyeballs. So you sometimes get those lucky breaks. And if you can take those lucky breaks and capitalize on that and say, all right, well, how do I then guide people back to my website? A fraction of a percent of those 30,000 people that click on it from one of those mass postings from Flickr are ever going to do it. But a fraction of a percent a day of 30,000 people is a great way to build social media. So give them an incentive. Emailing is of course a very good way to gather this too. So if you can take all of these people and build an email list and get into their inbox, you've got to hit them from as many different angles as you can, as long as those angles are not constantly asking people to buy something. When you come up to that point where you're asking people to commit to buy, then take a more personal approach whenever you can. At the end of every one of my posts, when I would ramble on for like 4 or 5 paragraphs on all the cool stuff in the Snowflake, at the bottom of it, it says, oh, by the way, here's a link to the book. That's not at the top of the post, it's at the bottom. I don't want people that don't read the whole post to see that front and center every single time, because I don't want to bludgeon these loyal people to the point where they are just totally uninterested in anything that I have to offer from that point forward.
No, that's very practical advice, and I always say that, if you've captured somebody to the end, that's when you can make the ask, because if you lead with the ask, you're going to turn a lot of people away. But if you've hooked them. Now, I imagine you've created networks and joining these different accounts together. Are you seeing different types of behavior from different social media platforms? Like, do you connect really well with photographers over here, but you see a lot more traction of selling books and prints on another platform? And, and how has the print business been for you, for that matter?
I do sell fine art prints in addition to the book, and it's funny because I also promote, and I only made a couple of these, but this is a limited edition copy of the book, and it's if I open this up, this is really fun because this is a leather-bound copy that has an extra signature of pages in it. It has a sewn-in bookmark. It's a limited numbered edition, and so I've only sold like 5 of them. But the point is that people will see something really interesting and really fine-tuned and absolutely perfect, and they enjoy the fact that it exists, and they buy the cheaper version. And so, I mean, this is what happens with...
It just proves that it's a good product.
Well, exactly. And so, but back to your question, is that do I find different engagement levels based on sales versus interaction? I'll find that I get far more likes on Facebook than I do actual substantial, like anything of substance. Whereas on Google Plus, up until a little while ago, they had a really cool feature called Ripples, where you could see who shared what, and then from them, if people shared from them, and it would kind of create this spider web. And I found that really useful to see where these book orders were coming from. And the fun thing was, a lot of them came from reshares, so that if somebody were to share it and is seen by somebody else, then they are more likely, still it's going to be a small percentage, but they are more likely to then buy the book as opposed to a direct link from me. Possibly because it's a new audience, or possibly because it's word of mouth and my credentials are being bolstered by somebody else's enjoyment of my work that they already have an affinity towards. So being able to sort of document those kinds of metrics are very valuable, because that tells you where to put your efforts.
Cool. Well, we've got... I just want to remind folks, if you had any more questions, we've got about 10 minutes left in today's show, so post those questions in the Q&A pod or on the Google Plus page. We'll be drawing from that in just a moment to give away a copy, a 1-year subscription to the Adobe Creative Cloud Photographer's Plan. So if you have anything you'd like to post, feel free to do that. Skip, you look like you have a question there that you've been thinking about.
Well, it wasn't something that came up before. It was the question from Brian Casey, which, if it's the Brian Casey I know, he's also affectionately known as 3 Buffet Brian. One of the only people I know to ever do breakfast, lunch, and dinner buffets at Vegas, and the guy is in great shape and 0 body fat, and it's aggravating. But this goes back years ago. But Brian, the issue of photographers taking projects and then being able to merchandise different components in different directions. Don's got a very unique project with snowflakes, and then he's taken us through some of the ideas of what you could do with it. As other examples, Lisa Murphy, I think her married name now is Lisa New, is a children's photographer out of Houston, who has a monstrous list of copyright/trademarks with Carlton cards. She was doing a lot of interesting work with children and doing wings on them and doing the fairy tale images that especially grandmothers love. And Carlton Cards picked it up as a series of cards, of statues, of different products. And if I remember right, I think I heard once that she had 89 different 189 different products with Carlton Cards. Now that could have grown over the years, but in the same respect, as photographers, when you're shooting a particular event or you're on location somewhere, you need to look at all the possibilities of where those images might be used. You may have done an incredible family shoot in a state park somewhere, and have an opportunity to tie that back in to outdoor wildlife, to another group that might be interested in some different aspect of that. In the same way with pictures of kids, of families, of pets. I know a couple of years ago, a lot of years ago, I had a couple of my images that our printer, when I was at Hasselblad, wanted to use in their calendar. All of these things take special projects and have the ability to give them more meaning. And I was just thinking, as Don was talking about the merchandising, and you remember the Into Spaceballs, the movie where they do all the merchandising. I think every photographer has that potential to do other things with their images if they think about the images themselves and who else those images might appeal to, and what kind of products they might go on. And today we've got a whole long list of some of them are pretty cheesy, and they're not necessarily my taste, but there are so many different applications for images, and especially when you start to talk about images that are taken in specific areas within your community and how they might be used by the Chamber of Commerce or a city calendar, or an annual report and things like that. So that's what Don what hit me a little while ago when he was talking about all the different things he's thinking about doing with the images.
And it makes me wonder now, Skip, if Carlton Cards wouldn't be interested in some snowflakes.
Well, but it's true. It's absolutely true. There's a whole stationery line there.
Well, we actually had a good question sort of on the same topic from Gail, and she was saying, when you're getting ready to start a project, do you look for any partners, people to collaborate with, maybe technical experts or business experts, sort of from the get-go, or like-minded people who share the same passion, so you form a smaller circle and you push each other? Do you build a support network when you get ready to start a project, or, would you going forward now that you're, maybe you're coming up on project number 2?
I needed the support of my family and friends, without a doubt. That was my support network, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I would want another person creating the artwork in the mix, especially earlier on, because, like I had mentioned, you don't want to have a personal project with the idea of monetizing it from the beginning. You can't start that way. So keep those people completely out of the equation and try to find something that is really unique to you. Because, I'm not the first person to photograph snowflakes. That's been happening for over a century. But I'm the first person to do it in the exact same way that I have, with the same passion that I bring to the table. And if you have one, it doesn't matter how eclectic and random the project happens to be, if it is unique, then you will find the people that appreciate that project in the global village in which we all live. Because it was such a narrow field, okay, I'm taking macro photographs of snowflakes in a very specific way, it got the attention of some very important people. It got connections into magazines and documentaries and all of these other things. Not because they were looking for a macro photographer, because they were looking for a snowflake photographer, and they were looking for the best one. And so they came to me. And so you have to find something for which there are very few players and for which you can excel above and beyond with your skill and your passion to be the best, or very near the best, or unique in a way that you can't be compared to anybody else. And I think that's really where your personal project will come into its own. And because of its uniqueness, who knows how it could be monetized in different ways? That's up to you. But if you spent a lot of time and effort on it, you'll find the way.
Very cool. And if nothing else, you'll come away from the process invigorated. We have time for one more question. This one came from Vaughn, and he's saying, if you're getting ready to tackle your next project, do you think you would do things the same way, of building up an audience and connecting with people and share everything that you did, or is there anything you would do differently the next time, or thinking about trying differently?
I would share everything. In fact, I love sharing everything, and I love telling everybody my secrets, because a lot of the stuff that I do is very technical. And I'll tell you one idea that I have right now, and I haven't even attempted this. If somebody beats me to it, then so be it. Good on you. But I have an idea to make water droplet refractions in like a flower inside of a water droplet showing through like a leaf or something. I've done a lot of those kinds of images if you see my portfolio. But I want to do a time-lapse video of those as they shrink, because they'll evaporate over time. And then I want to play that backwards to make this leaf look like it's blooming flowers inside of droplets. And then I want to make that flower spin inside the droplet, which you can do pretty easily with an egg timer. And then I want to make the camera shift on a little rail so that the position of the flower inside of the droplet is constantly shifting. But I want that rail to be not just one directional but two directional, so that the focus is also shifting on the camera as it's you see where I'm going with this? Mm-hmm. This is going to be something that I can do, and I can write and tell everybody everything as to how I do it, but the number of people that are actually going to attempt it are going to be very few, but it's going to be adding credibility to the fact that yes, he was able to do this, and yes, it's sort of a wonderful piece. And who knows what that idea might turn into, maybe a small short film, and there might not be anything that I could monetize from it. But it'd be a really cool, fun project to work on. I'm not thinking about monetizing it when I come up with this idea and execute it. If that happens down the road, so be it. But right now, it's just a fun idea, and I want to make some magic.
You are a technical daredevil. In fact, not only isn't there anybody that's going to pick that up, but I don't think Rich and I could even repeat all the components that you just laid out just now.
Well, you might be. I was running through a gear list. I got half of that gear in the other room, so
Yeah.
you and I should talk
I'm
offline.
in trouble.
No, I don't think I'm going to execute on that one, but I do like time lapse and I do like motion control. So if you have any questions, holler. We can brainstorm on it.
All right, perfect.
But
Thanks.
very cool. Well, this does actually bring us towards the end, and I enjoyed today. I think folks who listened, and we're going to also have a repeat of this. You shared a very repeatable process, which, if I could summarize, and then I'll have you correct me, you seem to be saying, find something you're truly passionate on and go as deep as you can go, and along the way, share your successes and failures with an audience, and then that audience is going to connect with you, and that will lead to the opportunity. Is that a good summary of what you learned?
I completely agree with the one caveat that the one thing that you're passionate about cannot be the same thing that everybody else is passionate about. Don't claim that that thing is landscapes or babies. You know, you have to find something a little bit more off the beaten path to start drilling down into, and that's where you'll find your success.
Great advice.
Well, if folks, this is very enjoyable. Remember, you can catch the replay over at Photo Focus, or Skip will share his link as well. The video will be live, or of course you can click right through if you missed the beginning of this. Let me just run the random number generator really quick. And our winner actually is Vaughn. So Vaughn, send me a note at rich@photofocus.com, and I'll get you connected with Adobe for your 1-year Creative Cloud photography plan. So thank you for tuning in for that. I am the publisher of photofocus.com. You guys can head on over there, and if you want to check in on social media, just look me up under Red Pixel, RHEDPIXEL. Skip, where can folks get in touch with you?
Oh, I'm Skip Cohen on Twitter and skipcohenuniversity.com and Skip Cohen on Facebook. And Don, where are they going to go to find you?
Well, we were talking a lot about snowflakes and the whole book project here. You can find direct links to that at skycrystals.ca. But for all of the other random shenanigans I'm up to, you can go to doncom.ca, DONKOM.ca, and all my social media links are there. And I encourage people, get in touch. I mean, this is a sort of a great roundtable conversation, and if you're listening and you feel like you've really enjoyed it, don't make this a one-sided friendship. Send me an email, and we'll keep the conversation going.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for joining and for sharing so much information. Skip, anything you want to add before the end of the show?
No, I just want to thank Don for taking the time today. This has been a great podcast. A lot of good information out there for everybody.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Don, for joining us, and thank you all for joining us live. And if you're catching the replay, thanks for tuning in.